Okay, let's give this a quick test before we get too far ahead of ourselves here. So let me know if the sound is good. First of all, I haven't done any sound changes, so hopefully everything there is good to go. I don't see. Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay, so mix about 20-second delay. And now let's see, I'm going to scroll a little bit around here, and I just need to know that it's scrolling there too. Just going up and down and then moving across a few of the tabs here. So hopefully we're seeing the tabs move on the other end as well. So let me know if those are good, and then we're good to go. I'm back on the Start Here tab, and hopefully don't have to be doing anything. All right, good. Okay, I just got to do two quick adjustments on my end to make it a little easier to navigate in this slightly odd format. Okay, here we're good to go. I'm not going to repeat myself here, so I'm going to skip back to the crop planner and try to do that very briefly, just so you can see the stuff I was talking about that I wasn't able to scroll to before. So maybe in a bit of detail as I go through, you can see we've got the tabs at the bottom there that I'm scrolling along. There's quite a number of them, but we're just going to focus on the main ones. So here I am at the crop planner, and as I mentioned before, what we're doing is we're inputting our orders up at the top here, our farmers markets and our restaurants and grocers and whatnot. We put in the number of each of the crops they want along with the size, and the spreadsheet here does a calculation down below. So this is letting us know how many trays to sow. So in essence, it's a fairly simple system. The key thing here is it's giving you precise numbers to use for your sowing. And that's the most important thing. Okay, good to know things are good on that end. This may seem at a small scale like it's a little more than you need. When I was doing production, I used to do just a summer production. I would produce from April through September, and I could just work stuff out on a week-to-week basis. I always knew about how much to sow for each harvest. As when I scaled up and went to year-round production, almost instantly our sales tripled because we were more than doubling our season. And with that many harvests to manage, and we had an increase in clients, there was no way we could just do it in a simple way anymore. So that's where this came out of. And so I say that because I think for a lot of smaller scale growers, something like this seems more than they need. And at that scale, it probably is. But as you scale up, the importance of being able to track your orders as well as having a very, very good and accurate record of those orders is going to become very, very important. And that's exactly what the spreadsheet here does. So we've looked at the crop planner here, which just briefly again, you put your orders in at the top here based on your expected orders or your expected sales at the farmer's market. Based on other information you've put in about each of your crops, it's going to generate data about how much you're going to sow. Once you do a harvest, you actually put in your numbers here, so the number of small, medium, and large units, as well as any bulk amounts there, and it's going to do some calculations so you have a good sense of what your actual yield is for that harvest. One of the reasons that's important is because this spreadsheet here is actually, it's just a model. It's a representation of real life. And in this model, our projected yield for sunflower, for example, is 5 small unit equivalents, or 5 small packages per tray. And so if you're finding that once you're doing your harvest and your actual yield is coming out to 4.5 or 5.8, you need to adjust your numbers elsewhere. Generally, if you're producing more or less, you need to change your expected yield for your crop because the yield you're working with is not accurate. Often we start off with a yield for a crop that we got maybe just from an internet chat or a reference book somewhere, and that's a good start. But over time, you're going to want to use your own yield numbers because the yields for different crops really vary between different systems. I get yields here for some crops that someone else would have a really hard time getting elsewhere, and vice versa. And that's just because of things like day length, growing experience, growing medium, seeds, things like that. So even though this is a model, we're always refining it. And so if I find my expected yield for sunflower is actually going to be more than 5, I need to change that so my future harvests are going to be more accurate. So it's very fluid and dynamic, and you'll want to change things over time. So that's the crop planner, which is really our planning platform. And it's really where you would spend most of your time in a spreadsheet like this. So when it comes to harvest and delivery, if there's a lot of information, if I scroll back up here, you can see we've got all these crops here, all these vendors, all these numbers, and there's a ton of information. So what we've just added is a bit of a summary page. And so what this does is it extracts the information from the crop planner and puts it into a more simple form. So what we're going to do here is we're going to run. This is going to run for the, see, this system doesn't quite like, I can't quite do all the things I want to do here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the summary. This is actually going to run it for a different date because I can't actually edit the dates on this here. So what I do is I come in, I run the summary. Oh, it's not going to let me. Not quite that fully featured. But luckily there's a summary run here already. So what we've done is basically taken our date and it's summarized things here for us. And so I can see for the one farmer's market, I need 50 small sunflower, 40 small pea, 25 small radish, and all the restaurants are summarized there as well. So I can look at each of these clients and really, really quickly determine what I need to be packing for them for each delivery. If I want to get a summary overall, what you can basically do, it's a little tricky here. Just going to do it like this. I'm going to try and do it. There we go. So here in my total, this tells me how many total of each product I need to package. So I need 68 small sunflower, 27 large sunflower, and so on for each of the crops. So it's a really simple way to just take all that information from the crop planner and make it a lot more simple to read. Once again, like all the pages, there's the tutorial video here, so you can always take a quick look at the tutorial at any time, which is going to be specific to the sheet that you're working on. So those are the two main things you're going to use each week. You're going to plan your crops, and keep in mind you're planning your crops for the following week, right? When I'm planning my crop for January 22nd, I need to be thinking about this 10 or 15 days ahead of time because I need to sow the crop in order to be mature by that time. So you're always looking into the future, and you're always taking a projected harvest date and working backwards. And this is a basic concept in crop planning for ground crops as well. When it comes time to harvest and getting our orders ready, we're summarizing things here to make that much easier. And that becomes really, really important when you've got, this is 10, maybe 12, 13 clients here. But if you've got 40 or 50 clients, then that organization is really, really crucial to keeping organized. Okay, so I'm going to scroll along. There's more stuff in here, but what I'm going to do now is scroll along to our season production and sales totals. And this is where I think a lot of people spend almost as much time on a page like this because this is where a lot of the data is generated. So the key data here is really based on a per crop basis, and it breaks it down per harvest. So the crop planner is designed to accommodate 2 harvests per week. Now some people do more than 2 harvests per week, and in that case this isn't going to be the tool for you, not in its present form. But 2 harvests a week is going to meet the needs of most systems, even at a bigger scale. It'll also accommodate 1 day a week as well, and you can choose that day or either of these days. I just work with Tuesday and Friday because those are the days that we actually work with. So if you look here, just in terms of the trays that get sowed in this first section here, this is a breakdown by crop. So we've harvested or sowed about 6,600 crops for the year, and this breaks down what those trays were. Then it goes down into what the different units sold were. So this is just the number of units, not the value of them. So you could see we sold a lot of 12,000 small units and about 10,000 large units. And in this model, we didn't sell any medium units. And then it breaks down trays as well, but we're not selling any trays in this unit. And then it breaks things down in terms of sales. And this is really crucial because you might be selling more of one tray or sewing more of one tray, but actually making more money from another. So this just helps break down, out of the $38,000, here I am down here, of large units for Fridays, most of that's coming from sunflower. So it's just a really good way to understand where your sales are coming from and how all the costs break down. And this gives you a value per tray here as well. So you can see while the average value for a tray is about $18, this varies between the different crops, with arugula in this case being as low as $12.50. So ideally, we want all our trays to be as highly valued as possible. That can be difficult. In the case of arugula, I either need to increase my price or I need to increase the yield I'm getting out of the tray. And that's what's going to bring the value of each tray up. I can increase my price only as high as the market is going to bear. And so you have to know your market very well. Are you dealing with lots of very high-end restaurants that have a good budget that can pay top dollar all the time for a product? Or are you going to have, are you going to do more farmers markets and grocers and selling direct to consumers, where in order to get repeat business, you're going to have your price not so much on the lower end, but at a price point at which people are going to give you their repeat business. That can be a real challenge to figure out. And that's going to be really regional specific, and it's going to be very crop specific. So within this as well, because we've input a bunch of other information, we know what our total cost of seed and soil is going to be for the year. We know what our packaging cost is going to be. So it's going to cost us $5,700 for all those small packages. So, that's, it's still a percentage of our sales. So it's important to keep that in mind. There's also a labor calculator, which we'll take a quick look at, and that's a big number here at about $83,000 per year. So having done the projections for this year, and this is sort of a theoretical projection for 2020, right now our projected profit is actually sitting at a loss. So we'll do $122,000, almost $123,000 in sales, but this spreadsheet is showing a loss. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. This just means we need to go back and take a look through the spreadsheet and understand where all our expenses are coming from and where all our revenue is coming from, and how we can increase the revenue and keep the expenses down. I'll mention here that this spreadsheet is designed to pay you. So this means that you've been paid for the hours of work you've done. It's the business that isn't making a profit. And in most cases, you are the business. But what I do is there is an hourly wage built into this that accounts for your time. So let's just take a quick look here. I'm going to scroll a bit further to the next one. And oh no, we're back a little bit. I forgot I moved this. And just looking at our wages, oops, we're one too far, our simplified labor calculator. So what I do is I look at labor on a month-to-month basis, not a week-to-week basis. I have done that, but it's a lot of work. And this is just sort of, since it's a model, the idea here is to use the model to get a very close estimate of what you think labor will be. So the labor for each day is going to vary depending on the types of tasks that happen. So in this model, Monday is a sowing day, Tuesday is a harvest day, not much happens on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday are sowing and harvest days respectively again, Saturday is a market day, and Sunday there's just a bit of work to be done. So this is a pattern that exists in this system throughout the whole year. Now, as the season goes on and production numbers go up, some of these hours will increase, and as we add farmers markets, as we do later in the year, we're going to have to add more hours there as well. So looking at 3 different wage levels, what this section here has done is given us an estimate of about $83,000, $83,500 for our labor costs for the year. Now, the wages are calculated elsewhere. So I've got these three wage levels at 14, 16, and $18. The $18 wage level is basically your wage level. These are Canadian dollars, and these might be atrociously low or atrociously high, depending where you are. But this is where we start looking at if there's not a profit, we start looking at, okay, well, what happens if I pay myself $16? Then you would make a change here, and you would put that number in, and then you would see how things change. And I can't do it in the current format, but what you'll see is that a lot of your numbers are going to change, and this $83,000 is going to go down. And then when we look at our total input costs, oops, we are back this way, for season total input cost, we're going to see our profit go up because our labor cost is going to go down. So that's just one example of where I would look at bringing costs down. I'm very mindful about reducing labor costs because I generally value the people that work with me and for me. And so one of my goals as a business is to pay them as high a wage as possible. So usually the first thing I would do is reduce my own wage. However, ideally we want to keep our wages pretty high. So one of the things I go back and as I look to is at our annual overhead costs, which is another thing we put in here. Now for this model, there's quite a lot of costs, which includes about $5,200 in farmers market fees. So we might want to look at maybe we want to do less farmers markets, especially if sales aren't meeting our expectations because we're paying fees to get there, to be there. There's a lot of setup and takedown, and we're paying somebody to be there each time. So while farmers markets generate a good amount of revenue, they also cost a lot of money to be at. This model has $1,500 in advertising, almost $4,000 for electrical, and then things like organic certification, repairs, equipment upgrades, and even $1,100 in paper towels, which yes is an actual number. So this is another place I would look at. It's like, oh, okay, look, well, our interest payments are going to go down this year because we paid off that loan and we don't have a lot of credit card debt. We've reduced our banking fees by $100 because we moved banks. We got some new software. We got a better glove, so those costs go down. So when we start reducing our overhead costs, then we'll find that we can bring our profit up as well. So this is, a classic challenge in business, how to balance your expenses and your revenue. And having a system like this is really, really helpful. Is adjusting your price is going to make a huge difference. So in this model, I've set my large size, which is 450 grams, at $18. So this is about a pound, $18 per pound. And if I take all these numbers and change them to $20 a pound, nothing else changes in terms of labor and packaging and all that stuff. All we've done is change the price. We'll see our revenue is going to increase greatly, and our profit is going to go up. So this is where that balance between pricing, putting up prices and keeping expenses low comes in. But once again, if I put my price too high for any of my products, I'm not going to get enough repeat sales to maintain those sales. So it's really tough to find that sweet spot, and it's why you want to operate a very efficient operation and make sure you're not spending money that you don't have to. So this is an overview of the key features of the crop planner. Hopefully it gives you a sense of what to expect, how things can be manipulated, and where you would be spending most of your time. If you do have some questions, do type them in now. There's a bit of a delay, so it'll take a second for it to get to me, or for me to get to you and for you to respond. But the key thing here is hopefully you start seeing a model like this as a very powerful tool to be able to make these, to use a tool like this to help you run a microgreens business. In the beginning, there's a lot of challenges, and so having something like this to help manage your managing your crop production, manage your time, things like that is going to go a long way towards helping you be more successful. So at this moment, I'm not seeing any questions pop up. I'm going to assume it's because people have fallen asleep or have moved on to other things. I explained things too well, so you're just overwhelmed with good information. But you can always post comments later here, and I'll keep an eye on them. Usually, I get a notice when a new comment comes in. Uh, Seed info. I need a bit more. I need a little bit more to work on than that to get a sense of what you're looking at there. And I wonder if you're talking about sort of the numbers and stuff that I was talking about in terms of projected yield and stuff like that. Seed info. So tracking for so when you bring in like a certain amount of seed and you want to keep stock. Yeah. So you can keep track of seed in here. Where do I have that in here? So I have a seed purchase archive here. So as you bring in seed, um, you can keep track of it in here. That way you have a good sense of what your seed looks like over time. Some seed might last you a year. Some seed you might be replacing every month. So this is just a simple archive. We are currently working on turning this spreadsheet into an online platform, and on that platform uh, it'll help keep your stock basically. So if you input 100 kilograms of seed of sunflower seed, for example, every time you sow, the program will know to reduce that from your stock, and it can give you warnings when your seed is starting to run low and give you a prompt to start thinking about ordering again. That does not exist in this version. Generally, seed stock, even at a bigger scale, is a fairly easy thing to manage because you're interacting with your seed all the time. And a few times over the years, I've been caught sort of a little short on seed and had to sort of rush order something at great expense. But most of the time, it's going to be fairly easy to manage that. In terms of suppliers, suppliers is going to really depend on where you are. Now, being in Southern California, you're going to have a very good a number of seed suppliers for a bunch of products there. I'm based in Canada. Here, there's a company called Mums Sprouting Seeds, MUMMS, and I think they're actually at sprouting.com. I'll write that down here so it's in the and they specialize in seeds for sprouting and whatnot that I've bought from over the years. But depending where you are, your suppliers are going to be very different. In many ways, Mums might still be a good supplier for you, even though it's a long way to ship. One, because you're getting a very good price, and two, that price is going to be in Canadian dollars. And with the exchange right now, Americans do very well by buying seed from Canadian sources. But there are a number of suppliers in California, and in California you might be able to buy seed direct. There is a decent amount of seed production that happens in California, so you might be able to find a larger scale grower that can provide you seed directly. Otherwise, this is definitely a Google search uh, to see what you can find. There are, I will say, a lot of companies out there that do smaller quantities of seed, and the price per unit weight is quite atrocious. So I think just having been a commercial producer for a long time, if you're a small scale grower and you need to buy 5 or 10 kilograms of certain seeds at a time, and hundreds of grams of other seeds at a time, that's fine. But once you start getting to a bigger scale, you need to be buying seed in much bigger volumes, and you're going to get a much better price when you do that. And not all the microgreen seed companies can supply that volume, because a lot of them are catering to very small scale growers and home growers. But if you're going to scale up to a bigger size, you need to deal with someone who can supply to you at a commercial scale. And then you're going to be bringing in seed by the pallet load. And so there'll be a lot of investment, but you're going to save a lot of money on a per unit weight rate. Any other questions while we're on the topic of seeds? I'm going to go, just because I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to show when I talked about the numbers we put in. So when we have a crop, we have a bunch of details about each crop. So here, this is the information that went in earlier. I have a sowing rate in grams per tray, And for each size, small, medium, and large, I have the size in grams. So you can use ounces. That's totally fine. I have a wholesale price and I have like a retail price. And so I have that for each of my crops. The key thing that is produced here is what is the sowing rate per seed, because the spreadsheet does calculate what the cost of that is based on the cost of your inputs and what your projected yield is per tray. And so the reason I know to sow 18 trays of sunflower based on my production numbers is because my expected yield per tray is 625 grams. And so, like I said, that value may change over time, but what you want to do is input some values to start with, and then you adjust those values over time. And the spreadsheet does give you an average of the last 3 weeks of yield for all of your given crops. So if you're seeing in after 4 weeks that a yield has moved from 5 to 5.8 on average, then you could probably bump that your projected yield up for that crop. So this would be where when you do bring in seed, you've got your, my package here is 10 kilograms. My price including shipping was $72.99. And so I can see my seed cost per kilogram is $7.30. And then it breaks down into the seed cost per tray based on the amount of seed I need to use per tray, which is up here at the top. So all this is sort of information you put in early, and you don't really need to change it on a regular basis. Okay, so waste sheet for not so good grows. I don't have a waste sheet, but what you're looking at, you could have. So in terms of a waste sheet, I assume you're talking about you're growing. There's two ways we can look at it. One, you're growing a crop and you're getting a very poor yield. So in essence, you're not making very good use of that seed, and it's a waste. And that's just the calculation exists in your average tray price essentially at the end of the year because you have a lower yield. But if we have extra crop that we don't sell, it's not accounted for in here. Where you'll see it in the crop planner is when you put in your numbers and you've got all your weight harvested, and then you find your actual yield, instead of being, in this case, 5 small units per tray, ends up being 7 small units per tray. You're going to have way more product than you need. And so that's how you're going to use this. You're going to look and go, okay, well, our yield is way too high, and we can see that because we've got 18 extra pounds of product here. So that's something you're going to adjust along the way. Yeah, it's a cost, but it's partially it's the cost of doing business, and partially it's the cost of learning to do good production. And what I found over time is there's no unexpected, or there's no, what I would say, unreasonable waste. Sometimes there's low yield, even though over time, like, it's very rare because the production is very tight. And sometimes it's rare that we produce way more than we expect, but there may be a time when you get a couple of cancellations, you're scheduled for a farmer's market and it's pouring rain that day. There's nothing you can do about sales. If you bring $1,000 of product to market one week and sell it all in 3 hours, and then you bring it the next week and it's pouring rain, you're going to sell about $200 or $300 of it. So there's not much you can do about that. In terms of here, I don't know that's as valuable here. What I tend to do is find a place to donate that product, make up an invoice for them. And so I've got an invoice for a free product. And then at the end of the year, then I can record how much I've donated. And some places can give you tax receipts, but you need to give them an invoice for it. So every time I go in, we'll go, well, we have 8 pounds of sunflower. They're valued at $15 per pound. So that's like $120. And then so here's the invoice with $120 worth of product and $120 credit on that. And in our system, we use QuickBooks for that. So when we look through QuickBooks, we can kind of look through and just pull out the donations. And then, at the end of the year, we can get an invoice from some of the people we donate to for that. That's not something that happens on here. This is not your invoicing program. This is more just for planning, and you would couple this with something like QuickBooks in order to do that tracking, because this isn't necessarily tracking your sales either. when you set this up at the beginning of the season, you are doing your projected sales for the season. So what I do is I create my projected sales for the season, then I copy that spreadsheet and I leave my projected sales spreadsheet untouched, and then I start manipulating the new one on a week-to-week basis. Because obviously, if I look up here, restaurant 1 and restaurant 4 and restaurant 10, they're not going to take these same numbers every week all year. So the restaurants are going to change, the grocers are going to change, the volume is going to change, the markets are going to change. So I'm always going to have my original projection, which is really just a model. And in the first year, it's really going to be a model. But for the food peddlers going into like year 11 of production, you're going to have all your sales, your standing orders carry over to the next year, and you're going to have certain projections based on your previous year's sales. And so you're always going to have your sort of model spreadsheet, like your budget, like you might have for your business. Yeah, exactly. And then you're going to have your one that your dynamic one that you're changing all the time in order to get your crop production numbers on a week-to-week basis. What this does is says this is basically what my sales need to look like each week. So I need to sell to about 10 restaurants and 3 grocers if I want to do $123,000 in sales. And there's a week breakdown here where I can see it's about $2,200 a week. So this just kind of sets the tone. And it's like, okay, well, if I lose a couple restaurants, I need to get a couple more. Or if sales go down at one, I need sales to go up elsewhere. So you just use this to sort of change things on a week-to-week basis. Like I said, there's many things you can't account for, such as rainy farmers markets, canceled orders, but this at least gives you a sense of what to expect. And ideally, once you're in a flow, you're trying to improve on these numbers. So if your goal is $123,000 in sales, maybe you should be aiming for about $140,000. So you're overshooting what you need. And that way what you're doing is you're putting more time into marketing and outreach. And there's usually very, very little loss in doing that. It's always a good idea to be putting yourself out there all the time. Customers may not become customers right away, but they may become your customer in the future. So when you lose restaurant 2 in 6 months, restaurant 14 has come in and taken their place because you talked to restaurant 14 6 months ago or a year ago. So your marketing and outreach is always going to be bringing in new customers on different timescales. And you can't really account for that in your original model. So once again, you're just modeling it out, getting a sense of what your sales need to look like on a week-by-week basis, and then shifting that week to week to meet your actual orders. So as I mentioned, I found this was a key thing in us scaling up production at the Food Peddlers. We couldn't have done it without it. It's why I've made this spreadsheet available. And as I said, we are working now on an online version of this as well, which will have way more crop options, be much less intimidating to look at because you don't need to look at the whole spreadsheet. And we'll have a few new features as well. So that one's still going to be a while. We're in the prototyping phase right now. But we will keep people posted. We're running under the name Seedleaf, so you can check us out at seedleaf.co and sign up for updates there and get a sense of what kind of features it's going to have. Okay, so that is a very thorough overview of the crop planner, and hopefully not only gives you a sense of how the crop planner works, but also how you use it to on a week-to-week and an annual basis to help get a sense of what the flow of production looks like, how you use a spreadsheet on a day-to-day basis to understand what production looks like, and just get a sense of other features and things that go into production. You wouldn't think that a spreadsheet like this can be that valuable in your day-to-day production, but I think you'll find that it really is one of the the easier ways to do so. In terms of making a video on sanitizing, I cover sanitation and there's another word, it's totally escaping my mind, but I cover sanitation quite quite in detail on in my I do an online course for microgreens production. It's more focused on commercial production, but we do a lot of a big section on sanitation there. I have little bits and pieces of sanitation stuff on YouTube, but not in that kind of detail. Um, this spreadsheet actually has within it uh, sanitizing rates for seeds, so that's included within this, and actually it's included in the view only version as well. So you can see what kind of solution and mixes you need for both bleach, if that's allowed in your system, or sanidate, which is peracetic acid. So there is a reference here to give a sense of that. But yeah, sanitizing, there's either some videos, some basic videos on YouTube, or more detailed stuff in my commercial online course. Okay, so I think that's about all I can cover in one session, because I can't talk much anymore. But I hope you found that was valuable. Yeah, definitely leave some more comments if you want. I'll take a look on them as they come in. Feel free to take a look at the spreadsheet, which you can peruse quite in detail. It's on my website at urbanmicro.ca, and I think I'll post the view only version here as well. That way you can get a quick look at it, and just want to make sure I pull up the right version here because there's been a lot of them lately. I'll put it into the chat here, so this is the one you can view. That way you can take a look at all the stuff we've taken a look at here. You're just not able to manipulate that stuff. So hope that was helpful. Thanks for tuning in. I'm sure there's other things we could all be doing right now, but it's the holidays and it's good to just do nothing sometimes. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and watch for some new stuff coming up soon.